The fluorescent lights of Walmart hummed overhead as I stood in the checkout line, exhausted from a double shift at the warehouse. My cart held the basics: bread, eggs, instant coffee, the kind of groceries that whisper rather than shout. That's when I saw her. An older woman, maybe 60, standing at the register ahead of me with trembling hands. Her coat was 3 sizes too big, held together with safety pins. Her cart contained a loaf of bread, a jar of peanut butter, and a small carton of milk. Nothing more. The cashier's voice cut through the quiet hum of the store. That'll be $153.12. The woman's face went pale. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. She fumbled through a worn canvas bag, pulling out crumpled bills and loose change. I thought I counted, she whispered, her voice breaking. I'm sorry, I must have miscounted. People behind me shifted impatiently. Someone sighed loudly. The woman began removing items with shaking hands, starting with the milk. Something about the way she moved, careful, deliberate, like someone who once had dignity and was fighting to remember it, made my chest tighten. I stepped forward. I've got it, I said, handing my card to the cashier. The woman turned to me and for just a second our eyes met. Hers were striking, clear blue, the kind that seemed to hold entire stories. You don't have to, she said softly. I know, I replied. But I want to. The transaction completed in silence. The woman gathered her bags, whispered a thank you so quiet I almost missed it, and walked toward the exit. I watched her disappear into the parking lot, into the gray Columbus evening, and felt an odd pull in my chest. Like I just touched something important without understanding why. I had no idea that $150 would unlock a truth buried for 15 years. That the homeless woman I'd helped was Patricia Brennan, the lawyer who'd vanished the same night my entire world collapsed. The woman who knew exactly what Leonard Graves and Vivian Cross had done to me, and how they'd built an empire on the ashes of my stolen life. My name is Diana Foster, and until that evening in Walmart, I'd believed some wounds never speak again. I was wrong. Wounds don't heal. They wait. And sometimes they wait for a stranger in a checkout line to remind you that the past isn't finished with you yet. I didn't think about the woman again until 3 days later. I was stocking shelves at the same Walmart during my evening shift when I saw her outside, sitting on the curb near the shopping cart return. She had the same oversized coat, the same canvas bag clutched to her chest. This time she was crying. Not loud, theatrical tears. The silent kind. The kind that leak out when you think no one's watching. I clocked out early and walked over. She looked up, startled, and tried to wipe her face. You again, she said, almost smiling. Me again, I said, crouching down beside her. You okay? She laughed bitterly. Define okay. I didn't press. Instead, I offered her a bottled water I'd bought from the vending machine. She took it, unscrewed the cap, and drank slowly like she was savoring something rare. We sat in silence for a while. Then out of nowhere she said, You remind me of someone I used to know. Someone who got burned. I glanced at her. Yeah? What happened to them? She looked at me with those piercing blue eyes. They disappeared. Just like I did. Something cold slithered down my spine. Why did you disappear? Her gaze drifted to the parking lot. Because I knew too much. And because staying alive meant becoming invisible. I wanted to ask more, but she stood abruptly, shouldering her bag. Thank you for the water. And for the other day. You're kind. Don't let the world take that from you. She walked away before I could respond. But as she turned the corner, something slipped from her bag and fluttered to the ground. A business card. Faded, creased, but still legible. Graves and Cross Legal Consulting, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My heart stopped. I knew that name. Leonard Graves. The man who destroyed me 15 years ago. 15 years earlier, I was someone else entirely. Diana Foster, corporate attorney, rising star at Whitman Legal Group in Pittsburgh. I wore tailored suits, drank overpriced lattes, and believed the system rewarded hard work. I was naive. My partner at the firm was Leonard Graves, charming, brilliant, and ruthless in ways I didn't recognize until it was too late. We worked on high-profile cases together, splitting victories and commissions down the middle. Or so I thought. Vivian Cross joined our team as a junior associate. She was sharp, ambitious, and Leonard's favorite within a week. I didn't mind at first. Mentorship was part of the job. But then I started noticing things. Late-night meetings I wasn't invited to. Clients who requested Leonard and Vivian specifically. Documents that required my signature but never crossed my desk first. One evening, I stayed late to finish a brief. Leonard's office door was cracked open. I heard Vivian's voice, low and conspiratorial. She has no idea we've been rerouting her accounts. By the time she notices, we'll have everything moved offshore. Leonard's laugh was soft. Diana trusts too easily. That's always been her weakness. I froze in the hallway, my pulse roaring in my ears. I wanted to storm in to confront them, but some instinct, maybe fear, maybe survival, kept me silent. Instead, I went home and started digging. What I found made my stomach turn. Over 18 months, Leonard and Vivian had systematically siphoned funds from my client accounts, forged my signature on settlement agreements, and funneled money into shell companies under their control. Nearly $2 million. All traced back to me. When I tried to report it, I found that they'd already filed a complaint against me, accused me of embezzlement, fraud, and malpractice. My professional reputation evaporated overnight. My bank accounts were frozen. My daughter Emma, who was 7 at the time, was staying with my mother while the investigation unfolded. Then one night, I came home to find my apartment ransacked. A note on my kitchen counter, handwritten in Vivian's looping script. Walk away, Diana, or Emma pays the price. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the floor of my destroyed living room, clutching my phone, trying to decide if I should call the police or run. By dawn, I made my choice. I withdrew the last $300 from an ATM, packed a single duffel bag, and left Pittsburgh without looking back. I told my mother to keep Emma safe, to tell her I was on a work trip, that I'd be back soon. It was the last time I spoke to my daughter, because 2 weeks later Leonard and Vivian made sure I couldn't. They filed a restraining order, claiming I was mentally unstable and a danger to my child. They presented falsified psychiatric evaluations, fabricated emails threatening violence, and testimonies from colleagues I'd never wronged. The court granted them custody. My mother, terrified and confused, complied. And just like that, I lost everything. My career, my reputation, my child. Even my name felt like a lie. I ended up in Tucson, working under the table at a truck stop diner. I dyed my hair, stopped wearing makeup, and learned to disappear into the rhythm of fryers and coffee pots. Years blurred together. I sent letters to Emma through AP. Box, but I never knew if she received them. I didn't dare call. Leonard had connections everywhere, and I knew if I surfaced he'd finish what he started. But I never stopped watching. I followed his career online. Graves & Cross became one of the most prestigious legal firms in Ohio. They represented Fortune 500 companies, politicians, and celebrities. They smiled for cameras at charity galas, accepting awards for their pro bono work. They built their empire on my stolen money and my ruined name. And I stayed silent until I moved to Columbus 5 years ago and took a job at Walmart, stocking shelves and trying to remember what it felt like to be human. I thought I'd buried Diana Foster, the lawyer, the mother, the woman who believed in justice. But the moment I picked up that business card in the parking lot, something inside me cracked open. Patricia Brennan. The name on the card. I knew that name. She'd been a senior partner at Whitman Legal. The one person who tried to help me before everything fell apart. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. She'd called me the night before I ran, warning me that Leonard had powerful allies and that I should disappear. Then she vanished too. And now, 15 years later, she was homeless, sitting outside a Walmart in Columbus, carrying a card from the firm that destroyed us both. I found her again 2 days later at St. Vincent's Mission, a shelter near downtown. She was sitting at a corner table in the dining hall, spooning soup slowly, like she had all the time in the world and none of it mattered. I slid into the seat across from her. She looked up unsurprised. "I wondered if you'd come," she said quietly. "You dropped this." I placed the business card on the table between us. Her expression didn't change. "I didn't drop it. I left it." My throat tightened. Why? She set down her spoon and leaned back. Because I knew you'd recognize the name. And because after 15 years of hiding, I'm tired. Tired of running. Tired of watching them win. I stared at her. You know who I am. It wasn't a question. She nodded. Diana Foster. The woman they erased. I was there the night Leonard and Vivian set the trap. I tried to stop it. I had evidence, recordings, financial statements, everything. But they got to me first. Her hands trembled slightly. They threatened my grandchildren. Said if I testified, accidents happen. So I took the evidence and disappeared. I thought if I stayed gone, they'd leave my family alone. Her voice cracked. I was wrong. They didn't need to hurt anyone. They just needed me silent. I leaned forward, my pulse racing. You still have the evidence? She reached into her bag and pulled out a small USB drive, wrapped in plastic and duct tape. Everything. 15 years of guilt and proof. I stared at the drive like it was a bomb. Why now? Why give this to me? Patricia's blue eyes met mine, sharp and clear despite the years. Because I saw you help a stranger without hesitation. Because you're still kind even after everything they did to you. And because I'm dying, Diana. Cancer. Stage 4. I've got maybe 3 months. Her smile was sad. I want to go out knowing I did one good thing. That I gave you the weapon they feared most. My hand shook as I took the drive. What's on here? Wire transfers. Emails. Audio recordings of Leonard and Vivian planning the embezzlement. Proof that they forged your signature. Testimonies from clients they defrauded. And a video confession I recorded the night before I disappeared, explaining everything. She paused. Enough to bury them. Enough to get your daughter back. The word daughter hit me like a fist. I hadn't said Emma's name out loud in years. She's 22 now, Patricia said softly. She lives in Cleveland. She thinks you abandoned her. Tears blurred my vision. Does she hate me? Patricia reached across the table and squeezed my hand. She doesn't know the truth, but she will. If you're brave enough to fight. I spent the next 3 weeks living in the Columbus Public Library. I checked out the USB drive on one of the older desktop computers in the back corner where no one paid attention. What I found was staggering. Leonard and Vivian hadn't just stolen from me. Over 15 years, they defrauded at least 30 clients, embezzled over $12 million, and built their entire firm on fraudulent settlements and forged documents. Patricia's recordings were damning. In one, Leonard's voice was cold and clinical. Diana's too ethical. She'll never see it coming. Once we file the complaint, her credibility is destroyed. No one believes a disgraced lawyer. Vivian's laughter followed. And if she tries to fight back, we'll make sure she loses more than her career. I listened to that recording 3 times, my hands clenched into fists. I printed everything. Financial records. Emails. Transcripts. I organized it into a binder 2 inches thick, cross-referenced and highlighted. Then I did something I hadn't done in 15 years. I hired a lawyer. Not a big firm. Just a solo practitioner named Jacob Lane who specialized in legal malpractice and wrongful convictions. I walked into his modest office above a pizza shop and set the binder on his desk. I need your help, I said. And I need you to believe me. Jacob was in his 50s, gray-haired and soft-spoken. He listened without interrupting as I explained everything. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and exhaled slowly. This is explosive, he said. If even half of this is true, they're going to prison. It's all true, I said. He nodded. Then we need to be smart. If we go public too soon, they'll bury this. We need leverage. We need them exposed in a way they can't spin. He tapped the binder. They're hosting a legal summit next month at the Columbus Convention Center. High-profile event. Judges, politicians, media. If we're going to take them down, that's where we do it. The next 4 weeks were a blur of preparation. Jacob filed motions quietly, requesting a review of my original case. He contacted former clients of Graves and Cross who'd settled suspiciously. He reached out to journalists who'd covered white-collar crime. Meanwhile, I did something harder. I wrote a letter to Emma. I didn't mail it. Not yet. But I needed to put the words down to explain why I disappeared, why I couldn't come back, why I never stopped loving her. I folded the letter and kept it in my coat pocket, close to my heart. Patricia's health declined rapidly. I visited her at the hospice center every other day. She was weaker each time, her skin pale and thin, but her mind stayed sharp. "You're really going to do this?" she said one afternoon, smiling faintly. "I am," I said. "Good." She closed her eyes. "I wish I could see their faces when it all comes down." "You will," I promised. "I'll tell you every detail." She squeezed my hand. "Make them remember your name, Diana." 2 weeks before the summit, Patricia passed away in her sleep. The hospice staff said it was peaceful. I sat by her bed for an hour after, holding her hand, whispering thank you into the silence. She'd given me everything. The evidence. The courage. The reminder that some fights are worth finishing. At her small memorial service, only 3 people attended. Me, a hospice chaplain, and a young woman with Patricia's blue eyes who introduced herself as her granddaughter. "She talked about you," the woman said quietly. "She said you were going to do something important." I nodded, unable to speak. "She believed in you," the granddaughter continued. "Don't let her down." I promised I wouldn't. The Columbus Convention Center sparkled under late autumn sunlight, the day of the Legal Innovation Summit. Inside, the ballroom was filled with Ohio's legal elite, defense attorneys, prosecutors, judges, and corporate counsel. Leonard Graves stood at the center of it all, silver-haired and confident, shaking hands and laughing. Vivian Cross stood beside him in a crimson dress, her smile practiced and cold. They were being honored with the Justice Leadership Award for their contributions to legal reform and pro bono work. The irony was sickening. I wore a simple black dress and kept my head down as I slipped into the back of the ballroom. Jacob sat 3 rows ahead, his face calm. The plan was simple. Wait for the award presentation. Then strike. The MC took the stage and began the introduction. "Tonight we honor 2 pioneers of ethical law practice, Leonard Graves and Vivian Cross, whose firm has set a standard for integrity and justice." Applause filled the room. Leonard and Vivian walked to the stage, waving graciously. The MC handed Leonard the microphone. He cleared his throat, his voice smooth. "Thank you. This award represents years of hard work, sacrifice, and a commitment to doing what's right, even when it's difficult." I stood up. Every head in the back rows turned toward me. I walked down the center aisle, my footsteps echoing. Leonard's smile faltered. Vivian's face went pale. I reached the base of the stage and looked up at them. "My name is Diana Foster," I said, my voice steady and loud. "And 15 years ago, you stole my life." The room went silent. Leonard's jaw tightened. "Security." "No," I said louder now. "Everyone here deserves to know the truth." I pulled a folded document from my coat and held it up. "This is a federal filing submitted this morning. It details $12 million in fraudulent settlements, embezzled funds, and falsified legal documents, all tied to Graves and Cross." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Vivian stepped forward, her voice sharp. "This is slander. Remove her." "It's not slander if it's true," Jacob said, standing from his seat. He held up his own folder. "I'm Jacob Lane, and I represent Miss Foster. We have audio recordings, financial records, and testimony from 34 defrauded clients. The FBI has copies as of this morning." Leonard's face turned red. "This is absurd." "Is it?" I said. I looked at the crowd. 15 years ago, they accused me of embezzlement to cover their own crimes. They forged my signature, stole from my clients, and had me declared unfit so I couldn't fight back. They took my career, my reputation, and my daughter. My voice broke, but I kept going. They built this empire on lies. And tonight it ends. A journalist in the 3rd row stood up, camera flashing. Another followed. Within seconds, the room erupted. Security tried to approach, but Jacob blocked them, citing legal grounds. Leonard grabbed the microphone. "This woman is mentally unstable. She's been discredited." "Then explain this," I said, pulling out my phone. I played one of Patricia's recordings, loud enough for the front rows to hear. Leonard's voice filled the ballroom. "Diana's too ethical. She'll never see it coming." The room exploded. Reporters swarmed the stage. Cameras flashed. Leonard and Vivian tried to leave, but federal agents entered through the side doors. I watched as they were escorted out, their faces frozen in shock and rage. The woman who'd been invisible for 15 years had just stepped into the light. And this time the whole world was watching. The aftermath moved faster than I expected. Within 72 hours, Graves and Cross Legal was under federal investigation. Their assets were frozen. Clients filed lawsuits. The Ohio State Bar opened disciplinary proceedings. Leonard and Vivian were arrested on charges of fraud, embezzlement, forgery, and conspiracy. The media called it the largest legal scandal in state history. I didn't watch the coverage. I was too busy doing something more important. I was looking for my daughter. Jacob helped me locate Emma through public records. She was living in Cleveland, working as a graphic designer at a small marketing firm. She had an apartment in Ohio City, a neighborhood I'd never seen. I stood outside her building for 20 minutes before I found the courage to press the buzzer. The intercom crackled. Hello. Her voice. After 15 years, her voice. I opened my mouth but nothing came out. Hello? Is someone there? I forced the words. Emma, it's your mother. Silence. Long, terrible silence. Then the line went dead. I stood there staring at the speaker, my heart sinking. I turned to leave, but the building door opened. Emma stood in the doorway. She was tall with dark hair pulled into a messy bun. She had my eyes but her father's jawline. She looked like a stranger and like home all at once. You have some nerve, she said quietly. Her voice wasn't angry. It was flat, empty, like she'd practiced this moment 1,000 times and drained all the emotion out of it. I know, I said. Emma, I can explain. She crossed her arms. Can you? Can you explain why you left when I was 7? Why you never called, never wrote, never even tried? I did write, I said. I sent letters every month for years. To your grandmother's address. Her face flickered with confusion. I never got any letters. I know. Leonard made sure of that. She flinched at his name. Don't blame him for your choices. He's the reason I had to leave, I said, my voice breaking. Emma, I didn't abandon you. I was protecting you. She laughed bitterly. Protecting me? From what? I pulled the folded letter from my pocket, the one I'd written weeks ago. From the people who destroyed my life and threatened yours. Please, just read this. She stared at the letter but didn't take it. Why now? Why show up after 15 years? Because I finally have proof, I said. Proof that everything they told you about me was a lie. Her eyes narrowed. Who's they? Leonard Graves and Vivian Cross. The lawyers who took custody of you. The ones who convinced everyone I was unfit. Emma's face went pale. How do you know those names? Because they were my colleagues. My partners. And they framed me for crimes they committed so they could steal everything I had, including you. She stepped back, shaking her head. This is crazy. It's the truth, I said. Emma, I know this is a lot, but I need you to hear me out. Just once. If you still want me to leave after that, I will. Promise. She looked at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Finally, she opened the door wider. You have 10 minutes. Emma's apartment was small but bright, filled with plants and frame design work. We sat at her kitchen table. A scarred wooden thing that looked secondhand but loved. I told her everything. The embezzlement scheme. The forged documents. The restraining order. The threats against her safety. The 15 years I spent hiding because I believed Leonard would hurt her if I came back. She listened without interrupting, her face growing paler with each detail. When I finished, she stared at her hands. Grandma never told me any of this, she said quietly. She probably didn't know the whole story, I said. Leonard was very good at controlling information. He made sure everyone believed I was dangerous, unstable. He isolated me so completely that even the people who loved me doubted me. Emma looked up. If this is true, why didn't you fight back sooner? Because I had no proof, I said. And because I was terrified. Leonard had money, power, connections. I was a disgraced lawyer with nothing. Who would believe me? So what changed? She asked. I told her about Patricia. About the Walmart encounter, the business card, the USB drive. About the evidence that had been hidden for 15 years, waiting for someone brave enough to use it. Emma was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I need to see it." I pulled out my phone and showed her some of the documents Jacob had compiled. Financial transfers with forged signatures. Emails discussing how to discredit me. Audio recordings of Leonard and Vivian planning the scheme. She read and listened in silence, her jaw tightening. When the recording of Leonard's voice said, "Diana's too ethical, she'll never see it coming," Emma flinched like she'd been slapped. "I met him once," she said softly. "Leonard. He came to Grandma's house when I was maybe 9 or 10. He said he was checking in, making sure I was okay. He brought me a stuffed animal and told me you were sick, that you couldn't take care of me anymore." Her voice broke. "I believed him. I thought you didn't want me." Tears streamed down my face. "I wanted you every single day. I thought about you every morning when I woke up and every night before I slept. I kept every drawing you ever made, every school photo. I carried them with me for 15 years. She wiped her eyes. "Why didn't you try harder to reach me?" "Because Leonard had a restraining order," I said. "If I contacted you, he could have me arrested. And if I was in jail, I couldn't protect you at all." Emma stood abruptly and walked to the window, her back to me. For a long time she didn't speak. I waited, my heart pounding. Finally she turned around. "I don't know if I can forgive you," she said. "But I believe you. It wasn't everything. But it was enough." Emma and I didn't fall into an easy reunion. There were too many years, too many wounds. But we started talking. She came to my apartment, a cramped studio above a dry cleaner, and we sat on my thrift store couch drinking cheap tea. She told me about her childhood, about the grandmother who raised her with quiet love, and the absence that shaped her. She told me about the letters she'd written to me as a kid, letters she never sent because she thought I wouldn't care. "I wrote you on your birthday every year," she said. "I'd fold them up and keep them in a shoebox under my bed. I stopped when I turned 18. I figured you'd moved on." I pulled out my own box. A battered shoebox held together with packing tape. Inside were the letters I'd sent her, every one returned to sender. Dozens of them spanning 15 years. Emma's hands trembled as she opened the first one. It was dated 3 months after I disappeared. The handwriting was shaky, desperate. "My dearest Emma, I hope this reaches you. I hope you know I didn't leave because I wanted to." She read them one by one, tears streaming down her face. When she finished, she looked at me. "He kept these from me. Leonard. He made sure I never knew you tried. He wanted you to hate me," I said. "It was part of the plan. If you hated me, you'd never question his story." Emma's jaw tightened. "I want to see him." I hesitated. "Emma, the trial hasn't started yet. He's out on bail." "I don't care," she said. "I need to look him in the eye and tell him what he took from me." I understood that need. The need to confront the person who broke you. To speak your truth to their face, even if they don't deserve to hear it. "Okay," I said. "But we do it together." Leonard Graves lived in a sprawling colonial in a gated community outside Cleveland. The house was absurd, white columns and manicured hedges, the kind of place that screamed wealth and respectability. Emma and I parked across the street and sat in my rusted sedan, staring at the house. "You don't have to do this," I said. "Yes, I do," she replied. We walked up the driveway together. I rang the doorbell. Leonard answered. He looked older than I remembered, his hair fully silver now, his face lined with age. But his eyes were the same, cold, calculating, predatory. When he saw me, his expression hardened. "Diana, I should have known you'd show up here." "We're not here for you," I said. "We're here for Emma." His gaze shifted to her, and for a moment, something flickered across his face. Regret? Fear? I couldn't tell. "Emma," he said carefully, "it's good to see you. I've been worried about you." "Don't," Emma said, her voice shaking. "Don't pretend you care about me." He frowned. "I do care. I've always cared." "You cared enough to lie to me for 15 years, she said. "You told me my mother abandoned me. You told me she was dangerous, that she didn't want me. You made me believe I wasn't worth loving." Leonard opened his mouth, but Emma cut him off. "I read the emails. I heard the recordings. I know what you did. You stole from her, framed her, and took me away so she couldn't fight back." Her voice broke. "You made me grow up thinking I was unwanted. Do you have any idea what that does to a child? Leonard's face flushed. You don't understand. It was complicated. No, Emma said. It was cruel. And I'm done letting you pretend otherwise. She stepped closer. You're going to prison. And when you're sitting in that cell, I want you to remember that I know the truth. That everyone knows. And that you'll never have power over me or my mother again. Leonard's mask slipped. Anger flashed in his eyes. Your mother was weak. She would have lost everything anyway. Maybe, Emma said. But at least she would have lost it honestly. You built your life on lies. And now it's all gone. She turned and walked back to the car. I followed, leaving Leonard standing in the doorway, his empire crumbling around him. The trial began 3 months later. The courtroom was packed with journalists, former clients, and legal observers. Leonard and Vivian sat at the defense table, their expressions stoic. I sat in the gallery with Emma on one side and Jacob on the other. The prosecution presented the evidence methodically. Financial records showing the embezzlement. Emails planning the scheme. Patricia's video testimony, recorded before she died, laying out the entire conspiracy. Witnesses testified about fraudulent settlements and forged signatures. When it was my turn to take the stand, I walked to the witness box with my head high. The prosecutor asked me to describe what happened 15 years ago. I told the story simply, without embellishment. The theft, the false accusations, the restraining order, the loss of my daughter. When I finished, the defense attorney stood up. He was a sharp-faced man with an expensive suit. Miss Foster, he said, isn't it true that you had financial troubles before these alleged crimes occurred? I had student loans, I said. Like most people. And isn't it true that you had access to the same accounts you claim were embezzled? I had access because I was a partner at the firm, I said. But I didn't take the money. Leonard and Vivian did. He smirked. How convenient that you have no alibi for the times these transfers occurred. I have something better than an alibi, I said. I have proof that I wasn't the one who authorized them. Jacob stood and submitted the forensic analysis of the digital signatures. An expert had compared the metadata on the forged documents to my actual work files. The forged signatures came from a different IP address, one registered to Leonard's home office. The defense attorney sat down. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all counts. Leonard's face was ashen. Vivian stared straight ahead, expressionless. The judge set sentencing for 4 weeks later. As the bailiffs led them away, Leonard turned and looked at me. For the first time I saw fear in his eyes. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just nodded. He'd spent 15 years taking everything from me. Now finally I'd taken something back. My name. My truth. My daughter. Sentencing day arrived on a cold morning in early spring. The courtroom was quieter this time. Less media frenzy. Just the core players and a handful of observers. The judge was a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a reputation for tough sentences. She reviewed the case file in silence before speaking. Mr. Graves, Miss Cross, she began. You held positions of trust and responsibility. You were officers of the court, sworn to uphold justice. Instead, you exploited that trust to commit fraud on a staggering scale. She looked directly at Leonard. You didn't just steal money. You stole a woman's reputation, her livelihood, and her child. You manufactured evidence to destroy her credibility. You manipulated the legal system to ensure she had no recourse. Her gaze shifted to Vivian. And you, Miss Cross, were complicit in every step. You enabled, encouraged, and profited from these crimes. The judge closed the file. This court sentences Leonard Graves to 18 years in federal prison. Vivian Cross, you are sentenced to 14 years. Both of you will be required to pay full restitution to your victims, a sum exceeding $12 million. You are both disbarred, effective immediately. Leonard's attorney started to object, but the judge cut him off. This court is adjourned. I watched as they were led away in handcuffs. Emma squeezed my hand. It's over, she whispered. It's over. But it wasn't. Not quite. The restitution process took months. Leonard and Vivian's assets were liquidated. Their houses, their cars, their investment portfolios, All of it sold off to repay the people they'd stolen from. I received a check for $1.8 million, the approximate value of what they'd taken from me, adjusted for inflation. I stared at it for a long time. This piece of paper that represented 15 years of stolen life felt strange. Not triumphant. Not satisfying. Just strange. Emma and I sat in my apartment, the check on the table between us. "What are you going to do with it?" she asked. I thought about it. "I'm going to start a foundation," I said. "For people who've been wrongfully accused. Legal fees, living expenses, whatever they need to fight back." Emma smiled. Patricia would have liked that. "Yeah," I said. "She would have." I paused. "What about you? What do you want?" She looked at me surprised. "What do I want?" "From me," I said. "From this. I know I can't give you back the years we lost, but I want to try. If you'll let me." Emma was quiet for a moment. Then she reached across the table and took my hand. "I want to know you," she said. "Not the version of you I imagined or the one Leonard described. The real you." Tears welled in my eyes. "I'd like that." We started small. Coffee once a week. Then dinners. Then weekend trips to places neither of us had been. We learned each other slowly, carefully, like archaeologists uncovering something precious and fragile. She told me about her art, her dreams of opening her own design studio someday. I told her about the years in Tucson, the truck stop diner, the way I'd learned to live in the quiet spaces between other people's lives. One evening, she showed me the shoebox of unsent letters. "I think I'm ready to let these go," she said. We drove to a state park and built a small fire. One by one, she fed the letters to the flames. Not out of anger but out of release. When the last one burned, she looked at me. "I don't want to live in the past anymore," she said. "Neither do I," I replied. We stood there in the firelight, watching the smoke rise into the spring sky, carrying away the weight of 15 years. A year later, I stood in a small community center in Columbus, surrounded by folding chairs and donated coffee. The sign on the door read Brennan Legal Defense Fund, named after Patricia, the woman who'd given me back my life. The fund provided free legal assistance to people who'd been wrongfully accused, people who had no money, no power, no voice. People like I'd been. Emma designed the logo, a simple compass rose, symbolizing finding your way back. Our first client was a woman named Teresa, who'd been accused of embezzling from her employer. She had no evidence to prove her innocence, just her word against a corporation. We took her case. 6 months later we won. She cried when the verdict came in, and I held her while she shook with relief. "Thank you," she whispered. "You gave me my life back." I thought of Patricia, of the way she'd sat outside Walmart with nothing left but her integrity. Someone did the same for me once, I said. The fund grew slowly but steadily. We helped 12 people in the first year, 24 in the second. Jacob joined us as our lead attorney, working pro bono on the hardest cases. Emma managed outreach and design, crafting campaigns that told our clients' stories with dignity and power. One afternoon, I got a call from an unknown number. "Is this Diana Foster?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes," I said cautiously. "This is Margaret Brennan, Patricia's granddaughter. We met at her memorial." I remembered her, the young woman with Patricia's eyes. "I saw what you're doing," Margaret said. "The fund, the work. My grandmother would be so proud." My throat tightened. She made it all possible. "I know," Margaret said. "That's why I'm calling. I want to help. I'm finishing law school next year, and I'd like to volunteer. If you'll have me." I smiled through tears. We'd be honored. Patricia's legacy lived on, not in statues or awards, but in the lives we rebuilt one case at a time. Emma and I took a road trip that summer, driving through Pennsylvania to visit my mother's grave. She'd passed away 4 years earlier, while I was still in hiding. I never got to say goodbye. The cemetery was small and overgrown, tucked into a hillside outside Pittsburgh. We found her headstone under a maple tree. Emma knelt and placed flowers on the grave. "I wish I'd known her better," she said. "She talked about you all the time," I said. "Showed me pictures. Told me stories. She loved you so much." Emma wiped her eyes. "Do you think she knew? That you were innocent?" I nodded. I think she did. Deep down. But Leonard was very convincing and she was scared. She thought keeping you away from me was protecting you. Was it? Emma asked. I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe if I'd fought harder, Leonard would have done something worse. Or maybe I should have risked it. I'll never know. Emma stood and took my hand. I don't blame her. Or you. I just wish things had been different. Me too, I said. We stood there in the quiet, the summer wind moving through the trees, and I felt something shift. Not closure exactly, but acceptance. The past had happened. We couldn't change it. But we could choose what came next. As we walked back to the car, Emma said, Do you ever think about what you'd say to Leonard if you saw him again? I thought about it. I used to imagine grand speeches, telling him exactly how much he'd hurt me, making him feel every bit of pain he caused. And now, she asked. Now I don't think I'd say anything, I said. He's not worth my words. He already lost everything that mattered. Emma smiled. Good. We drove home in comfortable silence, the Pennsylvania hills fading behind us, the road ahead open and bright. 5 years after the trial, I received an invitation to speak at a legal ethics conference in Chicago. The topic was wrongful accusations and the systemic failures that allow them to happen. I almost declined. Public speaking terrified me, and part of me still wanted to stay invisible. But Emma convinced me. Your story matters, she said. People need to hear it. So I went. The conference hall was enormous, filled with lawyers, judges, and law students. I stood backstage, my hands shaking, wondering what I'd been thinking. Then I heard my introduction. Diana Foster, founder of the Brennan Legal Defense Fund, wrongfully accused, vindicated, and now an advocate for justice reform. I walked onto the stage. The lights were blinding. I couldn't see the audience, just shapes in the darkness. I took a breath and began. 15 years ago, I lost everything, I said. My career, my reputation, my child. I lost my name. I became a ghost, invisible and voiceless. I told them about Leonard and Vivian, about the embezzlement, the forged documents, the restraining order. I told them about Patricia, about the kindness of a stranger that changed everything. I told them about the fight to reclaim my life, and the work we were doing now to help others do the same. When I finished, the room was silent. Then someone stood and started clapping. Then another. Then the entire room rose to their feet. I stood there, stunned, as the applause washed over me. These were people who understood the system, who knew how rare it was to win against institutional power. And they were honoring not just my victory but the fight itself. Afterward, people came up to thank me, to share their own stories, to ask how they could help. A law student told me she'd switched her focus to defense work because of what I'd said. A judge told me he was implementing new protocols to prevent wrongful accusations. Emma was waiting for me outside the hall. You did it, she said, beaming. I almost threw up, I admitted. She laughed. But you didn't. You stood up there and told the truth, just like you taught me to do. We walked through Chicago in the fading light, the city glowing around us. I thought about the woman I'd been 15 years ago, the one who believed the system was fair, who trusted too easily. She was gone, but in her place was someone stronger. Someone who'd learned that justice doesn't come from institutions. It comes from people who refuse to stay silent. Emma opened her design studio the following spring. It was a small storefront in a revitalized neighborhood, with big windows and exposed brick. She called it Foster Creative, and when I asked why, she said, Because you taught me to build something from nothing. I cried when she said that. The studio thrived. Emma's work was bold and honest, the kind of design that told stories instead of just selling products. She hired 2 assistants within the first year, both young women who reminded me of her. Hungry, talented, unafraid. One evening, she invited me to a gallery showing of her work. The theme was reconstruction, pieces that explored loss and rebuilding. One wall featured a series of collages made from torn letters, reassembled into new shapes. That's us, she said, pointing to a piece called Return to Sender. It was made from the letters I'd sent her, the ones that had been returned unopened. She'd torn them apart and rebuilt them into the shape of a compass. I stared at it, tears streaming down my face. It's perfect, I whispered. She hugged me. We're not broken anymore, Mom. We're just different. And that's okay. I realized then that healing doesn't mean going back to who you were. It means becoming someone new. Someone shaped by what you survived. On the 10th anniversary of Patricia's death, Emma and I returned to St. Vincent's Mission. We brought donations, clothing, toiletries, food. But more than that, we brought time. We sat with people, listened to their stories, reminded them they were seen. An older man told us he'd been a teacher before he lost his house. A young woman said she'd left an abusive relationship with nothing but a backpack. Everyone had a story. Everyone had been someone before the world forgot them. As we were leaving, a woman approached me. She was younger than Patricia had been, but she had the same wary eyes. "Are you the lady who paid for someone's groceries at Walmart?" she asked. I blinked, surprised. "That was a long time ago. People still talk about it," she said. "About how you didn't hesitate, how you just helped." She paused. "It gives us hope that there are still good people out there." I didn't know what to say. I'd never thought of that moment as significant. It was just something anyone should do. But maybe that was the point. Kindness doesn't have to be grand, just has to be real. "Thank you," I said, "for telling me that." She nodded and walked away. Emma looked at me. "You changed her life with $150. Patricia changed mine with a business card," I said. "Kindness compounds." We drove home as the sun set over Columbus, the sky painted in gold and amber. I thought about the woman I'd been, the one who stood in that Walmart line, exhausted and invisible. She had no idea what that small act would set in motion, how it would unravel a conspiracy, reunite a family, and create a legacy that would outlive us all. Patricia used to say that truth heals deeper than medicine. She was right, but so does kindness, and maybe in the end they're the same thing. Emma's studio became a gathering place for people who needed more than design work. She started hosting monthly community nights where local artists could share their work, and slowly, the space transformed into something bigger than either of us had imagined. One evening, a young man came in during one of these events. He stood awkwardly by the door, clutching a worn portfolio. Emma noticed him immediately and walked over. "Can I help you?" she asked gently. He hesitated. "I saw your Instagram post about offering mentorship to artists who can't afford formal training." His voice was barely above a whisper. "I've been working construction during the day and teaching myself graphic design at night. I know I'm not very good yet, but I thought maybe." Emma smiled. "Let me see what you've got." They sat at one of the work tables, and he opened his portfolio with trembling hands. The work was raw, unpolished, but there was something there. A spark. Emma spent the next hour reviewing his pieces, offering suggestions, showing him techniques. When he left, he had tears in his eyes. "Thank you," he said. "Nobody's ever taken me seriously before." After he was gone, Emma turned to me. "Did you see his face? That look of someone finally being seen?" I nodded. "I know that look. I wore it for 15 years. She came over and sat beside me. "Is that why you started the fund? Not just for justice, but because you remembered what it felt like to be invisible?" "Yes," I said. "When the world erases you, even small acknowledgments feel like miracles. A kind word, a second chance, someone believing you when everyone else calls you a liar." Emma leaned her head on my shoulder. "We're building something good, aren't we?" "We are," I said. "One person at a time." The Brennan Legal Defense Fund expanded beyond what I'd ever imagined. Within 3 years, we had satellite offices in 5 cities, staffed by volunteer attorneys and paralegals who believed in the work. We won more cases than we lost, and even the losses mattered because we gave people something they'd been denied, a voice. One case in particular stayed with me. A man named Curtis had been accused of assault by a former business partner who owed him money. The partner fabricated evidence, paid off witnesses, and nearly destroyed Curtis's life. He lost his job, his apartment, and custody of his son. When he came to us, he was living in his car. Jacob took the case personally. He spent 6 months tracking down inconsistencies in the prosecution's story, finding witnesses who hadn't been contacted, uncovering financial records that showed the business partner's motive. The day we won, Curtis collapsed in the courtroom. Not from weakness, but from relief so profound his body couldn't hold it. Afterward, he came to the office. I don't know how to repay you, he said. You don't, I told him. You rebuild your life. You get your son back. And someday if you can, you help someone else the way we helped you. He looked at me for a long moment. You really mean that? I do, I said. Justice isn't transactional. It's generational. We pass it forward. 6 months later, Curtis got a job as a youth counselor. He started volunteering at the fund, helping new clients navigate the intake process, offering the kind of understanding that only comes from lived experience. He became one of our most effective advocates because he knew exactly what our clients were feeling. The terror, the helplessness, the desperate need to be believed. I started teaching part-time at a community college, a legal ethics course for students who couldn't afford university tuition. Most of them were working multiple jobs, raising families, clawing their way toward degrees that might change their lives. They reminded me of who I'd been before everything collapsed. Hungry, determined, naive about how easily the system could devour them. One student, a woman named Iris, stayed after class one day. Can I ask you something personal? She said. I nodded. How did you keep going? After everything that happened to you? I thought about it. Honestly, some days I didn't. Some days I just existed. I went through the motions because stopping felt like letting them win. I paused, but then I'd remember why they wanted me to stop. Because my voice was dangerous to them. My truth threatened their lies. And I decided that was reason enough to keep speaking. Iris's eyes welled up. I was accused of cheating last semester. I didn't do it, but the professor failed me anyway. Now it's on my record, and I'm terrified it'll ruin everything I've worked for. My chest tightened. Did you appeal? I tried, she said. But the department sided with the professor. They said there was no evidence I didn't cheat, so they had to assume I did. The presumption of guilt. The same poison that had infected my case. That's backwards, I said. The burden of proof should be on the accuser, not the accused. I know, she whispered. But I don't have the money for a lawyer. I don't have any power. I looked at her for a long moment. What if I told you that you do? Her eyebrows furrowed. What do you mean? Power doesn't come from money or status, I said. It comes from refusing to accept injustice. From demanding to be heard even when they try to silence you. I pulled out my phone. I'm going to give you the number for our fund. Call them. Tell them I sent you. We'll help you fight this. Iris stared at the number like it was a lifeline. You do that? For me? I do it for anyone who's been wrongly accused, I said. That's what the fund is for. She hugged me hard and sudden. Thank you. Thank you so much. After she left, I sat alone in the empty classroom, thinking about all the Irises in the world. People whose lives could be derailed by a single false accusation, a single corrupt decision. The system wasn't designed to protect them. It was designed to protect itself. But we were building something different. Something that put people first. Emma met someone. His name was Adrian, a photographer who'd moved to Columbus to document the city's changing neighborhoods. He was quiet, thoughtful, and he looked at Emma like she was the only person in the room. She brought him to Sunday dinner at my apartment, nervous in a way I'd never seen her. Mom, this is Adrian, she said. He shook my hand. It's an honor to meet you, Miss Foster. Emma's told me so much about you. All good things, I hope, I said lightly. He smiled. She said you're the bravest person she knows. Emma blushed. Adrian's working on a project about wrongful convictions. I thought maybe you two could talk. We spent the evening discussing his work, the way photography could humanize statistics, turn abstract injustice into something visceral and undeniable. He showed me some of his portraits, faces of people who'd been exonerated after years in prison. These are powerful, I said. Thank you, he replied. I want people to see them as individuals, not case numbers. I want viewers to ask themselves, what if that was me? What if that was someone I loved? I looked at Emma. She was watching him with such warmth, such trust. I realized I hadn't seen her this happy in years. After they left, I sat on my couch, smiling to myself. My daughter was building a life. Not despite the past, but alongside it. She'd learned to carry the weight without letting it crush her. The fund received a substantial grant from a national justice reform organization. It was enough to hire full-time staff, expand our services, and launch a public awareness campaign. Emma designed the campaign. She called it Voices We Almost Lost. It featured portraits and stories of people we'd helped, shot by Adrian. The images were stark and beautiful. A mother holding her daughter after a custody battle we'd won. A man standing in front of his restaurant, which he'd nearly lost to a fraudulent lawsuit. A young woman in her college cap and gown, cleared of false academic misconduct charges. Each portrait was paired with a single sentence in bold text. They tried to erase me, but I'm still here. The campaign went viral. News outlets picked it up. Social media amplified it. Within a month, we received over 1,000 new inquiries from people seeking help. It was overwhelming and exhilarating and terrifying all at once. We hired 4 new attorneys, expanded our office space, and implemented a triage system to prioritize the most urgent cases. I worked 18-hour days, but I didn't mind. This was what Patricia had wanted. This was what she died to make possible. One evening, Jacob knocked on my office door. "You need to go home," he said. I looked up from the case file I was reviewing. "I'm almost done with this." "You've been saying that for 3 hours," he said. "Diana, you're going to burn out if you don't pace yourself." I rubbed my eyes. There are too many people who need help. If I slow down, someone gets hurt. He sat down across from me. "And if you collapse from exhaustion, everyone gets hurt. You're not immortal. You're allowed to rest." I knew he was right, but rest felt like surrender, like admitting there were battles I couldn't win. "How do you do it?" I asked. "How do you see all this suffering and not let it destroy you?" Jacob was quiet for a moment. "I remind myself that I can't save everyone, but I can save someone, and that someone deserves my best effort, which means I need to take care of myself." He stood. "Go home. Eat something. Sleep. The work will still be here tomorrow." I nodded reluctantly and gathered my things. As I walked to my car, I realized how long it had been since I'd taken a full day off. Months, maybe. I'd been so focused on helping others that I'd forgotten to help myself. I started seeing a therapist. Her name was Dr. Keisha Monroe, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense approach. Our first session was awkward. I wasn't used to talking about my feelings, especially not to a stranger. "What brings you here?" she asked. "My friend said I'm going to burn out," I said. She nodded. "And what do you think?" "I think I don't have time to burn out." Dr. Monroe smiled faintly. "That's usually when it happens." She leaned back. "Tell me about your work." I did. I told her about the fund, the cases, the people we'd helped. I told her about the grants and the expansion and the 18-hour days. "It sounds meaningful," she said. "It is." "But," she prompted. I hesitated. "But sometimes I feel like I'm trying to fill a hole that can't be filled. Like no matter how many people I help, it won't undo what happened to me." Dr. Monroe was quiet for a moment. "You're right. It won't." The bluntness surprised me. "Then what's the point?" "The point," she said gently, "is that healing isn't about undoing the past. It's about building a future where the past has less power over you." She paused. "You're doing incredible work, Diana. But if you're doing it to prove something, to fix something broken inside yourself, you'll never feel satisfied. Because you were never broken. You were wronged. And those are different things." Her words hit me like a wave. I'd spent so long thinking of myself as damaged, as something that needed repair. But she was right. I wasn't broken. I'd been shattered by people who chose cruelty. And I'd put myself back together piece by piece. "How do I stop feeling like I need to save everyone?" I asked. "You start by saving yourself," she said. I took Dr. Monroe's advice seriously. I started setting boundaries, delegating more, taking Sundays off completely. Emma noticed the difference immediately. "You seem lighter," she said one afternoon as we walked through a farmer's market. "I feel lighter," I admitted. "I've been carrying so much for so long that I forgot what it was like to just exist without the weight." She squeezed my hand. "I'm proud of you." We stopped at a booth selling handmade jewelry. Emma picked up a necklace, a simple silver compass pendant. "This reminds me of your fund's logo," she said. "You should get it," I said. She smiled. "Actually, I was thinking of getting it for you." She bought it and fastened it around my neck. So you always remember which direction you're going, she said. I touched the pendant, tears in my eyes. Thank you, sweetheart. We spent the rest of the afternoon wandering, talking about everything and nothing. For the first time in years I felt present, not haunted by the past or anxious about the future. Just here now with my daughter. It was enough. The fund celebrated its 5th anniversary with a small event at Emma's studio. We invited everyone who'd been part of the journey, attorneys, clients, volunteers, donors. The space was packed, warm with conversation and laughter. Jacob gave a speech about the cases we'd won, the lives we'd changed. Emma presented a slideshow of Adrian's portraits, each face a testament to resilience. Then it was my turn to speak. I stood in front of the room, looking at all these people who'd become family. 5 years ago, I began, I didn't know if this would work. I didn't know if one person with a second-hand laptop and a dream could make a difference. I paused. But I've learned that change doesn't require perfection. It requires persistence. It requires showing up day after day for people who need someone in their corner. I looked at Emma. My daughter taught me that. She showed me that even when the world tries to break you, you can choose to rebuild. And you can build something better than what you lost. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. After the speeches, people mingled. I talked to former clients who'd become volunteers who'd become staff. Curtis introduced me to his son, a teenager with his father's smile. Dad talks about you all the time, the boy said. He says you saved his life. He saved his own life, I said. We just gave him the tools. As the evening wound down, Emma found me standing by the window watching the city lights. Tired? She asked. Happy, I said. She smiled. Good. You deserve to be. We stood there together, mother and daughter, looking out at the world we'd rebuilt from ashes. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt something close to peace. Adrian proposed to Emma on a cold October evening. They were walking through the park where they'd had their first date, and he got down on one knee under a canopy of golden leaves. She called me immediately, breathless with joy. Mom, he asked me to marry him. And what did you say? I asked, laughing. I said yes. Obviously. I could hear the smile in her voice. I want you there, Mom. When we plan everything. I want you part of all of it. I wouldn't miss it for the world, I said. The wedding planning became a beautiful distraction from the intensity of the fund's work. Emma wanted something small and intimate, just close friends and family. She asked me to walk her down the aisle. Are you sure? I asked. You could ask someone else. Someone who was there for your whole life. She took my hands. You were there for my whole life. Even when you couldn't be physically present, you were fighting to get back to me. That counts more than anything. Cried, of course. The wedding was held in a botanical garden in spring, surrounded by blooming flowers and soft light. Emma wore a simple dress that she designed herself, elegant and understated. Adrian waited at the end of the aisle, looking at her like she was the sun. As I walked Emma down the aisle, I thought about all the moments I'd missed. Her high school graduation, her first heartbreak, her 21st birthday. But I was here now, and that mattered. When we reached Adrian, I placed Emma's hand in his. Take care of her, I said. I will, he promised. The ceremony was short and sweet. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promising to be honest, to be kind, to choose each other every day. When the officiant pronounced them married, the small gathering erupted in applause. At the reception, Emma and Adrian had their first dance to a song I didn't recognize. But halfway through, Emma pulled me onto the floor. Dance with me, Mom, she said. We swayed together and she whispered, Thank you for never giving up, for fighting your way back to me. Thank you for giving me a reason to fight, I said. As the evening progressed, I found myself talking to Adrian's parents, warm people who welcomed Emma with open arms. His mother pulled me aside. You've raised an extraordinary woman, she said. She's had a hard road, I replied. We both have. It shows, she said kindly. Not in a bad way. In a strong way. You can see it in how she carries herself. She knows who she is because you taught her to fight for the truth. Her words stayed with me long after the wedding ended. The fund continued to grow. We opened our 10th satellite office in a small town in rural Ohio, staffed by a retired judge who'd seen too many wrongful convictions in her career. She volunteered full-time, reviewing cases and training new attorneys. One afternoon, she called me about a case that made my blood run cold. A woman named Delia had been accused of fraud by her former employer, a powerful corporation with unlimited legal resources. They'd fabricated evidence, intimidated witnesses, and were systematically destroying her life. "It's the same pattern," the judge said. "The same tactics Leonard used against you." I flew out to meet Delia. She was in her 30s, exhausted and terrified. Her 2 young children sat beside her, quiet and wide-eyed. "I didn't do anything wrong," she said, her voice breaking. "I reported them for labor violations, and now they're trying to ruin me." I recognized the desperation in her eyes, the same desperation I'd felt 15 years ago. "We're going to help you," I said. "But I need you to trust us. Can you do that?" She nodded, tears streaming down her face. The case took 8 months. The corporation had deep pockets and a team of ruthless attorneys. But we had something they didn't. We had the truth. And we had a network of people who refused to let another person be destroyed by institutional power. We won. The corporation was forced to retract their accusations, pay damages, and reform their labor practices. Delia got her life back. When the verdict came in, she hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. "You saved me," she whispered. "No," I said. "You saved yourself by refusing to give up. We just made sure you weren't alone in the fight." That became our motto. You're not alone in the fight. Emma gave birth to a daughter 2 years after her wedding. They named her Patricia, after the woman who'd started it all. I held my granddaughter for the first time in the hospital, this tiny, perfect human who represented everything I'd fought for. "She has your eyes," Emma said, smiling. "And your stubbornness," Adrian added, laughing. I looked down at Patricia's sleeping face and felt a surge of emotion so powerful it took my breath away. This child would grow up in a world where her mother and grandmother had fought for justice, where she'd know that truth mattered, that resilience was possible, that kindness could change everything. "Welcome to the world, little one," I whispered. "You're going to do amazing things." As I rocked her gently, I thought about the chain of events that had led to this moment. $150 at a Walmart checkout. A business card dropped in a parking lot. A USB drive full of evidence. A woman brave enough to die with her truth intact. And me deciding that survival wasn't enough. That I needed to fight. Patricia's eyes fluttered open, and she looked at me with that unfocused newborn gaze. I smiled through tears. "Your great-grandmother would have loved you," I said. "She would have been so proud of everything your mom and I built in her name." Emma came over and put her arm around me. "We're going to tell her the story," she said. "When she's old enough. We're going to make sure she knows where she comes from." "Good," I said. "She should know that her family doesn't give up. That we fight for what's right, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." The 3 of us sat there, 3 generations of women who'd survived, who'd rebuilt, who'd refused to let cruelty have the final word. And in that moment I realized that karma hadn't paid in gold. It had paid in something far more valuable. It had paid in love, in family, in purpose. It had paid in the chance to make sure that what happened to me never happened to anyone else. That was worth more than any amount of money. That was worth everything. Young Patricia grew quickly, her curiosity boundless and her questions endless. By the time she turned 5, she was already asking about the photographs on my office wall, the ones showing people holding signs that read "Justice delayed is not justice denied," and the framed newspaper clippings about the fund's biggest victories. Emma and I had agreed to tell her the truth when she was ready, but we hadn't expected her to start asking so soon. One Saturday afternoon, Patricia sat on my lap while I worked at my home desk, coloring in a book while I reviewed case files. She pointed to a photograph on the wall, the one of me and Emma at the fund's opening ceremony. "Grandma, why are you crying in this picture?" she asked. I looked at the photo. My face was wet with tears, but I was smiling. Emma stood beside me, her arm around my shoulders. "Those are happy tears," I said. "Sometimes people cry when they're so happy they can't hold it inside." She considered this seriously. "Were you sad before you were happy?" The question caught me off guard. Children had a way of cutting straight to the heart of things. Yes, I said honestly. I was sad for a very long time. But then things got better. How did they get better? She asked. I thought about how to explain 15 years of pain, betrayal, loss, and eventual redemption to a 5-year-old. I met some people who helped me, I said. And I decided to help other people too. Helping others made me feel happy again. Patricia nodded, satisfied with this answer, and went back to her coloring. But the question stayed with me. How do you tell a child that the world can be cruel? That people you trust can betray you? That justice isn't guaranteed, it has to be fought for? Emma and Adrian came to pick Patricia up that evening. As Emma bundled her daughter into her coat, I pulled her aside. She asked me today why I was crying in that photograph. I said, the one from the fund's opening. Emma's expression softened. What did you tell her? A simplified version of the truth, I said. But she's getting old enough to ask harder questions. We need to decide how much we're going to tell her and when. Emma nodded slowly. I've been thinking about that too. I want her to know the truth, but I don't want to scare her. The truth isn't scary, I said. What's scary is not knowing. What's scary is thinking the world is safe and fair, and then discovering it isn't. I paused. She should know that bad things can happen, but also that people can overcome them. That's the important part. Not just what happened to us, but what we did about it. Emma agreed, and we started preparing how to tell Patricia our story in age-appropriate pieces. We decided to begin with the concept of fairness, something she already understood from playground disputes and sharing toys. One evening, Emma sat with Patricia at the kitchen table while Adrian and I watched from the doorway. Patty, Emma said gently, using her daughter's nickname, I want to talk to you about something important. About Grandma and me. Patricia looked up from her drawing, her expression curious. Okay. You know how sometimes at school, someone might say you did something you didn't do? And it's not fair? Patricia nodded vigorously. Tommy said I pushed him, but I didn't. He fell down by himself. Right, Emma said. And how did that make you feel? Mad, Patricia said. And sad. Because nobody believed me except you. Emma took her daughter's small hand. That happened to Grandma once. Someone said she did something very bad, but she didn't do it. And for a long time, nobody believed her except a few special people. Patricia's eyes widened. That's not fair. No, it wasn't fair, Emma agreed. And it made Grandma very sad. So sad that she had to go away for a while. Where did she go? Patricia asked. Emma glanced at me and I nodded. She had to go somewhere safe, Emma said. And while she was gone, I missed her very much. I thought maybe she didn't love me anymore. Patricia's face crumpled. But Grandma loves you so much. I know that now, Emma said. But I didn't know it then. I was confused and sad. Just like you were sad when Tommy said you pushed him. She paused. But then many years later, Grandma found a way to prove she was telling the truth. And she came back to me. And now we're together and everything is okay. Patricia thought about this for a long moment. Then she climbed down from her chair and walked over to me. She wrapped her small arms around my legs. I'm glad you came back, Grandma, she said. I knelt down and hugged her properly. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. The fund's work took on new meaning after that conversation. Every case became a chance to prevent another child from losing a parent, another family from being torn apart by false accusations. We took on a case involving a father who'd been falsely accused of abuse by his ex-wife during a custody battle. The accusations were fabricated, part of a strategy to gain full custody, and cut him out of his children's lives entirely. The evidence was flimsy, testimonies contradictory, but the damage had been done. He hadn't seen his kids in 2 years. Jacob worked tirelessly on the case, interviewing witnesses, consulting child psychologists, gathering evidence that proved the accusations were impossible. The trial was brutal, but we won. The judge ruled that the mother had engaged in parental alienation and awarded joint custody to the father. The day he was reunited with his children, I watched through the courthouse window as they ran into his arms. All 3 of them collapsed on the ground, sobbing and laughing and holding each other. That image stayed with me for weeks. It reminded me why this work mattered. Not just for abstract concepts like justice or truth, but for moments like that. for families being whole again. The fund received a request that made me pause. A woman named Simone wanted our help, but her case was unusual. She wasn't being accused of a crime. Instead, she discovered that her entire life was based on a lie. She'd been adopted as an infant, but her adoptive parents had told her she was their biological child. When she submitted her DNA to a genealogy website, she discovered the truth along with biological siblings she'd never known existed. Her adoptive parents had died years earlier, and Simone was left with a profound identity crisis and legal questions about inheritance, medical history, and her right to know the truth. "I don't know if this fits what your fund does," she said during our initial consultation, "but I saw what you went through, how you fought to reclaim your truth, and I need help doing the same thing." I looked at Jacob. He raised an eyebrow, considering. "It's not a traditional wrongful accusation case," he said, "but it involves someone being denied their truth, someone whose identity was taken from them." "Exactly," Simone said. "I spent 40 years living someone else's version of my story. I need to find out who I really am." We took the case. Over 6 months, we helped Simone navigate the legal complexities of her situation. We connected her with her biological family, helped her obtain her original birth certificate, and supported her as she processed the emotional weight of discovering her entire childhood had been a carefully constructed fiction. It wasn't a courtroom victory. There was no dramatic moment of vindication. But when Simone met her biological mother for the first time, watching them embrace and weep together, I knew we'd done something important. "Thank you," Simone said to me afterward. "Thank you for understanding that truth matters, even when it's complicated." "Especially when it's complicated," I replied. The fund's reputation grew beyond Ohio. We started receiving requests from across the country, people who'd heard about our work and hoped we could help them. We couldn't take every case, but we developed a network of partner organizations and attorneys who shared our mission. One request came from Alaska, from an indigenous woman named Kai whose land rights were being challenged by a development company. They claimed her family's documentation was fraudulent, that they had no legitimate claim to property they'd lived on for generations. "They're trying to erase our history," Kai told me over a video call. "They're saying we don't exist, that we never existed, just so they can build condos on our sacred ground." I connected her with an attorney in Anchorage who specialized in indigenous rights law. Together, they built a case using oral histories, genealogical records, and testimony from tribal elders. The case took 3 years, but they won. The development was blocked, and Kai's family's land rights were permanently protected. She sent me a photograph afterward, a sweeping landscape of mountains and water with a simple message: "This is still here because of you." I framed it and hung it in my office, next to Patricia Brennan's memorial photo. These were the victories that mattered. Not just individual lives saved, but communities protected, histories preserved, truths honored. Emma's studio expanded into a full-fledged creative agency. She hired a team of designers and started taking on larger clients. But she made sure to reserve time for pro bono work with nonprofits and community organizations. One project particularly moved me. She designed a series of public murals for downtown Columbus, each one telling the story of someone who'd been wrongfully accused and later exonerated. The murals were huge, vibrant, impossible to ignore. Each featured a portrait of the person alongside text explaining their story. Adrian photographed each subject, capturing not just their faces but their resilience. The first mural featured Curtis, the man who'd lost custody of his son. His portrait showed him smiling, his son on his shoulders. The text read, "They said I was violent. I'm not. I'm a father." The second featured Delia, the woman who'd been accused by her corporate employer. Her portrait showed her at work, confident and strong. The text read, "They said I was a thief. I'm not. I'm a whistleblower." The third was me. I hadn't wanted to be included, but Emma insisted. "Your story started all of this, Mom," she said. "People need to see your face. They need to know you're real." My portrait showed me standing in front of the fund's office, surrounded by our team. The text read, "They said I was a criminal. I'm not. I'm a mother who came home." The murals became landmarks. People took photos in front of them, shared them on social media, used them as meeting points. They sparked conversations about justice, about second chances, about the presumption of innocence. Local schools started bringing students to see them, turning them into teaching moments about critical thinking and the importance of evidence over assumptions. Emma received awards for the project, but she always deflected credit. "These aren't my stories," she'd say. "I'm just helping people see them." Patricia started first grade, and with it came new challenges. She was bright and curious but also sensitive, aware of things other children her age might miss. One day Emma called me, her voice tight with concern. "Patty came home from school crying," she said. "Another kid told her that having a grandma who was in trouble with the police means our family is bad." My chest tightened. "What did you say?" "I told her the truth," Emma said. "That you were never in trouble because you didn't do anything wrong. That someone lied about you but you proved they were lying." She seemed to understand, but I could tell it shook her. "Kids can be cruel," I said. "Especially when they're repeating things they've heard from adults." "Should I talk to the teacher?" Emma asked. "Or is that making too big a deal of it?" I thought about it. "Let me talk to Patricia first. Sometimes kids just need to hear from the person being talked about that it's okay." That evening I picked Patricia up from Emma's house and took her for ice cream, just the two of us. We sat at a picnic table outside the shop, the late afternoon sun warm on our faces. "Mom told me what happened at school," I said gently. Patricia looked down at her ice cream cone. I didn't know what to say. I just felt bad. "Bad like you did something wrong?" I asked. "Or bad like someone said something mean?" "The second one," she said quietly. "What did the kid say exactly?" She hesitated. "He said his dad said you were in jail, and that's why Mom didn't have a mom for a long time." I took a slow breath, pushing down the anger. "That's not what happened," I said. "I was never in jail because I never did anything wrong. Someone lied about me, and I had to stay away to keep your mom safe. But I always loved her, and I always wanted to be with her." Patricia looked up at me with those serious eyes. "Why would someone lie about you?" "Because they wanted to take things that belonged to me," I said. "Money mostly. And they thought if everyone believed I was a bad person, they could get away with it." "That's really mean," she said. "It is," I agreed. "But here's the important thing, Patty. They didn't win. I proved they were lying, and now I help other people who have lies told about them. I turned something bad into something good." She thought about this while she licked her ice cream. "So when kids say mean things at school, I should tell them the truth?" "You can," I said. "Or you can ignore them. Sometimes people say mean things because they don't know any better, or because they heard it from someone else who was wrong. You can't control what other people say, but you can control whether you let it hurt you." "Does it still hurt you?" she asked. "Sometimes," I admitted. "But not as much as it used to. The more time passes, the less power those lies have over me." Patricia nodded solemnly. "I think you're brave, Grandma." My throat tightened. "Thank you, sweetheart. I think you're brave too." The 10th anniversary of the fund approached, and we planned a major event to celebrate. Not just our team, but everyone we'd helped over the years, a reunion of sorts. The event was held at a downtown hotel, in a ballroom large enough to accommodate the 100-plus people who'd RSVP'd. I stood at the entrance, greeting people as they arrived. Curtis came with his teenage son, now tall and confident. Delia brought her children, who'd grown so much I barely recognized them. Iris, my former student, arrived with her law degree framed under her arm, having just passed the bar exam. "I wanted you to see this," she said, showing me the diploma. "I wouldn't have made it without you." "You did the work," I said. "I just gave you a chance." "Sometimes that's all people need," she replied. Jacob gave a speech chronicling the fund's evolution from a one-room operation to a national network. Emma presented a video montage Adrian had created, showing the faces of everyone we'd helped, their stories told in their own words. Then it was my turn. I stood at the podium, looking out at this room full of people who represented everything Patricia Brennan had believed in. That truth could win, that kindness mattered, that one person's courage could inspire countless others. 10 years ago, I began. I was standing in a Walmart checkout line, exhausted and invisible. I saw a woman who needed help, and I helped her without thinking twice. I had no idea that woman would change my life. I paused, emotion welling up. Patricia Brennan gave me proof of my innocence when she had nothing left to give. She trusted me with evidence that could have destroyed powerful people, knowing it might be her last act on earth. And she did it because she believed someone should fight back. I looked around the room. Everyone here has fought back in some way. You've refused to let false accusations define you. You've demanded to be heard when systems tried to silence you. You've turned your pain into purpose. My voice grew stronger. This fund exists because Patricia believed one person could make a difference. But the truth is, it takes all of us. Every person in this room is part of a movement that says injustice will not have the last word. That truth matters. That people matter. I held up my glass. To Patricia Brennan. And to every person who's ever refused to stay silent. The room erupted in applause. People stood, clapping and cheering. I saw tears, smiles, people hugging each other. Curtis's son started chanting, "Truth matters. Truth matters." And others joined in until the whole room was saying it together. I stood there overwhelmed, thinking about how far we'd all come. From ashes and despair to this. A room full of light and hope and determination. Patricia would have loved this. She would have stood in the back, quiet and proud, knowing her final act had created something that would outlive her. Something that would keep saving people long after we were all gone. The years continued to unfold with a rhythm I'd never expected to find. Patricia grew into a thoughtful, passionate child who wanted to be a lawyer like her grandmother had been, but a different kind of lawyer, the kind who helps people. Emma's agency thrived, becoming known for work that combined artistic excellence with social consciousness. Adrian's photography was exhibited in galleries, his series on exoneration and redemption winning national recognition. Jacob eventually retired from full-time practice but stayed on as the fund's senior advisor, mentoring younger attorneys and reviewing the most complex cases. I continued teaching my legal ethics course, now to standing room only classes. Students who'd heard about the fund, who'd seen Emma's murals, who wanted to be part of changing the system. I assigned them real cases to analyze, teaching them to spot the warning signs of false accusations, the patterns of institutional corruption, the ways power protects itself at the expense of the powerless. One student, a young man named Marcus, stayed after class one day. "My mom was wrongfully convicted when I was a kid," he said quietly. "She spent 8 years in prison before she was exonerated. By then I was grown and we'd lost so much time." His eyes met mine. "I'm going to law school because of her. Because of you. Because I want to make sure what happened to her, and to you, doesn't keep happening." "That's exactly why we need people like you in the system," I said. "People who understand the stakes aren't theoretical. They're someone's mother, someone's daughter, someone's entire life." He nodded. "I won't let you down." "You won't," I said. "Because you already understand the most important thing, that this work is personal. It should be personal. That's what gives us the strength to keep fighting." On a crisp autumn morning 15 years after that day in Walmart, I received an unexpected package. It was a small box carefully wrapped with no return address. Inside was a letter and a photograph. The photograph showed Patricia Brennan younger, standing in front of the law firm where we'd both worked. She was smiling, confident at the peak of her career. The letter was in her handwriting, shaky but deliberate. "Dear Diana, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I arranged for this to be delivered 5 years after my death. I wanted to give you time to build what we talked about, to make it real before I reminded you where it started. I need you to know something. Helping you wasn't just my final act. It was my redemption. I stayed silent when I should have spoken. I let fear control me for too long. Giving you that evidence, pointing you toward the truth, it was the first brave thing I'd done in 15 years. You gave me the courage to do it. That day in Walmart, when you paid for my groceries without hesitation, without judgment, you reminded me what kindness looks like. You reminded me that people can be good, even when the world is cruel. I watched you walk away that day and knew I had to do something. I couldn't die without trying to fix at least one thing I'd broken. So thank you, Diana. Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible. Thank you for being the kind of person who helps a stranger. Thank you for taking the evidence and doing what I was too afraid to do. And thank you for building something beautiful from something broken. Keep fighting. Keep helping. Keep reminding people that truth wins when we refuse to let it die. With gratitude and hope, Patricia. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Then I called Emma. "Come over," I said. "I need to show you something." She arrived within the hour, Adrian and Patricia with her. I showed them the letter, the photograph. Emma cried. Adrian put his arm around her. Patricia, now 10 years old and wise beyond her years, read the letter carefully. "She sounds like she was really brave," Patricia said. "She was," I replied. "But she didn't always feel brave. That's what made her courage real. She was scared, but she did the right thing anyway." Patricia looked up at me. "Like you." I smiled through tears. "Like all of us, sweetheart. Every person who's ever been wrongly accused and fought back. Every person who's helped someone even when it was hard. That's what courage looks like. Not the absence of fear, but the refusal to let fear win." We framed Patricia's letter and hung it in the fund's main office, next to her memorial photo. It became a touchstone for everyone who worked there, a reminder of why we did this work, and what was possible when people chose courage over comfort. The final chapter of my story doesn't have a dramatic ending. There's no courtroom showdown, no last-minute revelation. Just the steady, persistent work of building something that lasts. I'm 60 now, still teaching, still involved with the fund, though I've stepped back from day-to-day operations. Jacob's protege, a brilliant woman named Simone, yes, the same Simone we'd helped years ago, runs it now. She turned her own experience of reclaiming her identity into a passion for helping others do the same. Emma's daughter Patricia is 13, already volunteering at the fund, already talking about law school. She has her great-grandmother's clear-eyed sense of justice and her grandmother's creative spirit. I see myself in her too, in the way she refuses to accept easy answers, in the way she demands to know the why behind every rule. Emma and Adrian are talking about having another child. Their life is stable, full of love and purpose and community. When I look at them, I see what Leonard and Vivian tried to destroy but couldn't. A family, whole and healed and moving forward. Sometimes I think about Leonard and Vivian. They're both still in prison, both disbarred, both stripped of everything they stole. I don't hate them anymore. I don't feel anything toward them, really. They're just people who made terrible choices and paid the consequences. Their story ended. Mine continued. And that might be the greatest justice of all. The fund has helped over 3,000 people now. 3,000 lives that might have been destroyed but weren't. 3,000 families that stayed together. 3,000 truths that didn't die in silence. I think about the ripple effects. The children who didn't grow up without a parent. The careers that were saved. The people who, because they were helped, went on to help others. Justice multiplying, spreading outward like rings on water. Last week, a young woman came to the fund. She'd been accused of plagiarism by her professor. A false accusation designed to cover up the professor's own theft of her research. She was terrified, broke, certain her academic career was over. Simone took the case. I sat in on the initial consultation, watching Simone work with the same careful attention to detail that Jacob had once shown me. After the client left, Simone turned to me. "Every time I take a case like this, I think about you," she said. "About how different my life would be if you hadn't helped me find my truth." "You did the hard part," I said. "I just walked beside you." She smiled. "That's what we all do, isn't it? Walk beside people when they can't walk alone." That's exactly what we do. And it's enough. More than enough. It's everything. I still go to that Walmart sometimes. I walk through the aisles remembering the woman I was that day, tired and invisible and just trying to survive. I think about the choice I made to help a stranger without expecting anything in return. That choice changed everything. Not because it was grand or heroic, but because it was kind. Because it reminded someone they mattered. Because it created a moment of connection that spiraled into something neither of us could have predicted. Sometimes I see people struggling at checkout, counting change, putting items back. And I remember. I always help when I can. Not because I'm trying to recreate that moment with Patricia, but because that moment taught me something essential. Small acts of kindness aren't small. They're everything. They're how we signal to each other that we're not alone. They're how we build the world we want to live in, one choice at a time. My granddaughter asked me recently what I'm most proud of. I thought about it for a long time. Not the fund, though I'm proud of it. Not winning the case against Leonard and Vivian, though that mattered. Not even getting Emma back, though that's my greatest joy. What I'm most proud of is this. I survived. I was erased, destroyed, buried alive in lies, and I survived. I rebuilt myself from nothing. I turned my pain into purpose. I made sure that what happened to me meant something, that it protected other people, that it created change. I'm proud that when the world told me I was nothing, I refused to believe it. And I'm proud that I'm teaching my granddaughter the same lesson. That your worth isn't determined by what others say about you. It's determined by what you do when everything is taken from you. By whether you give up or keep fighting. By whether you let cruelty make you cruel or whether you choose again and again to be kind. That's the story I want to leave behind. Not a story about revenge or vindication, but a story about resilience. About the stubborn, persistent refusal to let lies define truth. About the power of one person, armed with nothing but determination and evidence, to bring down an empire built on fraud. About the choice to help a stranger. About everything that choice can become. 15 years ago, I paid $150 for a homeless woman's groceries. I had no idea who she really was. I had no idea what she'd give me in return. But I know now. She gave me my life back. She gave me my daughter back. She gave me a purpose that sustained me for a decade and will sustain others long after I'm gone. That's not karma. That's grace. That's the universe reminding us that kindness matters, that truth wins, that one small act of compassion can change everything. So I keep showing up. I keep teaching. I keep helping. Not because I'm trying to earn something or prove something, but because it's who I am now. The woman who was broken and rebuilt herself. The woman who lost everything and gained it back through truth. The woman who paid $150 and received in return a second chance at life. And on the days when the work feels heavy, when the stories of wrongful accusation pile up, when I wonder if we're making any real difference, I think about Patricia. Both Patricius, the woman who believed in me, and the girl who carries her name. I think about the chain of kindness that connects us all. And I remember that change doesn't happen all at once. It happens in moments, in choices, in the decision to help a stranger, to believe someone when everyone else calls them a liar, to fight back when fighting feels impossible. Those moments add up. They become movements. They become legacies. They become the world we leave behind. That's enough. That's everything. That's all any of us can do. The years folded into each other with a gentleness I hadn't known was possible. I turned 65 and officially retired from teaching, though I remained on the board of the Brennan Legal Defense Fund. The organization had become something beyond what Patricia or I could have imagined. A nationwide network with offices in 23 states and partnerships with law schools across the country. Young Patricia, now 15, had developed into a formidable presence. She'd inherited her mother's creative vision and my relentless pursuit of truth. A combination that made her both inspiring and occasionally exhausting. She started a podcast called Voices Unsilenced, where she interviewed people who'd been exonerated, giving them a platform to tell their stories in their own words. The podcast became surprisingly popular, reaching hundreds of thousands of listeners who were hungry for stories of resilience and justice. One evening, she came to my apartment with her recording equipment. "Grandma, I want to interview you," she said. "Really interview you. Not the sanitized version we tell at family dinners. The whole story." I hesitated. I told my story countless times in courtrooms, at conferences, in classrooms. But something about having my granddaughter ask felt different, more vulnerable somehow. "Why now?" I asked. "Because I'm old enough to understand it," she said. "And because people need to hear it from you, not from news articles or court documents. They need to hear what it felt like." So I told her. We sat in my living room for 3 hours while she recorded. I told her about the early days with Leonard, when I believed we were building something together. About Vivian's arrival and the slow erosion of trust. About discovering the embezzlement and the terror of realizing I had no power to stop it. I told her about the night I ran, leaving Emma behind because I believed it was the only way to keep her safe. About the years in Tucson working at the truck stop, dyeing my hair, becoming invisible. About the loneliness that felt like drowning. About the Walmart checkout line and Patricia Brennan's trembling hands. About the business card and the USB drive and the moment I decided to stop running and start fighting. I told her about seeing Emma again after 15 years. About the anger and hurt in my daughter's eyes. About rebuilding that relationship one careful conversation at a time. About the trial and the sentencing and the strange emptiness of victory. Patricia listened without interrupting, her young face serious and focused. When I finished, she turned off the recorder. "That's the bravest thing I've ever heard," she said quietly. "I don't know if it was brave," I replied. "Sometimes I think I just didn't know how to give up." "That's what brave is," she said. "Keeping going when giving up would be easier." She paused. "I want to be like you when I grow up." My throat tightened. "Be better than me. Be someone who never has to go through what I went through." "But if I do," she said, "I'll know it's possible to survive it. Because you did." The podcast episode featuring my interview became the most downloaded episode of her series. I received messages from people all over the country, some who'd been wrongfully accused themselves, others who'd lost faith in the justice system, all of them saying the same thing in different ways. "Your story gave me hope." That was worth more than any award or recognition. Hope was what we'd been building all along. Emma's agency took on a project that brought everything full circle. The city of Columbus commissioned her to create a permanent installation at the courthouse, something that would remind everyone entering the building what justice was supposed to mean. She designed a glass wall etched with quotes from people who'd been exonerated, interspersed with their portraits. Patricia Brennan's quote was there, from the video testimony she'd recorded before she died. "Truth doesn't need perfection. It just needs someone brave enough to speak it." My quote was there too, though I'd argued against including it. Emma insisted, "You can't tell this story without telling yours, Mom." The quote she chose was from something I'd said during a lecture years ago. "They tried to erase me. They failed. That's not my victory. It's truth's victory." The installation was unveiled on a gray morning in March. Hundreds of people attended, including many of the people whose portraits and quotes were featured. Curtis was there with his son, now a young man studying criminal justice. Delia brought her teenage daughters. Simone stood with her biological mother, their hands clasped together. When they pulled back the covering to reveal the installation, sunlight poured through the etched glass, casting fragments of quotes and faces across the marble floor. It was breathtaking, beautiful, and solemn and powerful all at once. The mayor gave a speech about justice and accountability. A judge spoke about the importance of vigilance against wrongful accusations. Then Emma invited me to say something. I hadn't prepared anything. I walked to the microphone and looked at all those faces, people whose lives had been shattered and rebuilt, people who'd survived the unsurvivable. "This installation isn't a memorial," I said. "These people aren't dead. We're here. We're alive. We survived systems that tried to destroy us, and we turned that survival into purpose." I gestured to the glass wall. Every person on this wall had a choice. They could have let bitterness consume them. They could have disappeared into the pain. But they chose to fight. They chose to help others. They chose to make sure their suffering meant something. My voice grew stronger. That's what justice really is. Not vengeance. Not punishment. It's the choice to turn pain into protection for others. It's the refusal to let cruelty have the final word. I looked at Emma, at Patricia, at everyone who'd been part of this long, difficult journey. Thank you for choosing to fight. Thank you for choosing to stay. Thank you for proving that truth doesn't die when someone tries to bury it. It just waits for someone brave enough to dig it up. The applause was thunderous, but what I remember most is the silence that came after. The way people stood in front of that glass wall, reading the quotes, studying the faces, understanding that justice wasn't abstract. It was these people. It was their stories. It was their refusal to disappear. I started writing a book. Not because I thought my story was more important than anyone else's, but because Patricia had been right. People needed to hear it told in full, with all the messy, painful, complicated parts included. The book took 2 years to write. I worked slowly, carefully, trying to capture not just what happened but what it felt like. The terror and the grief and the long, slow rebuilding. I included letters I'd written to Emma that were never sent, journal entries from my years in Tucson, transcripts from the trial, Patricia Brennan's video testimony in full. The book was published on the 20th anniversary of that day in Walmart. We held the launch at Emma's studio. The space packed with familiar faces and strangers who'd heard about the fund and wanted to support the work. I signed copies for hours, listening to people's stories, hearing echoes of my own experience in their words. One woman told me her brother had been wrongfully convicted and spent 12 years in prison before being exonerated. "Your book helped me understand what he went through," she said. "How he could be angry and hopeful at the same time." A man said he'd been falsely accused by a coworker and lost his job before the truth came out. I thought I was the only one who felt that specific kind of shame. The shame of being accused even when you're innocent. Thank you for putting it into words. These conversations reminded me why I'd written the book. Not for fame or recognition, but to create a record. To say this happened and here's what it felt like, and you're not alone if it happens to you. The book became a bestseller, but more importantly, it became a resource. Law schools added it to their curricula. Support groups for the wrongfully accused used it as a discussion guide. People who felt voiceless found their experiences reflected in its pages. That was the real success. Not sales numbers, but the knowledge that something I'd created was helping people feel less alone. My health began to decline gently, the way it does when you've lived a full life and your body decides it's earned some rest. Nothing dramatic, just the accumulation of small limitations. I moved into a smaller apartment, 1 floor instead of 2, closer to Emma and her family. Patricia visited often, sometimes to interview me for her podcast, sometimes just to sit and talk. We'd become genuinely close, not just grandmother and granddaughter but friends. She told me about her dreams of law school, her fear that she wouldn't be good enough, her hope that she could make a difference. "You're already making a difference," I told her. "Your podcast has reached more people than I could in a lifetime of teaching." "But I want to do more," she said. "I want to be like you and great-grandmother Patricia. I want to change things." "Then you will," I said simply. "Because you have something neither of us had at your age. You have examples. You've seen that it's possible. That makes you more powerful than you realize." She smiled, but I could see the weight of expectation in her eyes. "What if I fail?" "Then you'll fail," I said. "And you'll learn from it and try again. That's how this works. There's no perfect path to justice. There's just the path you walk, one step at a time." She nodded, absorbing this. Then she said, "Grandma, can I ask you something?" "Always." "Do you ever regret how things happened? Would you go back and change it if you could?" I thought about this carefully. If I could go back and prevent Leonard and Vivian from stealing from me, prevent the false accusations, prevent losing all those years with your mother, yes, I'd change that in a heartbeat. I paused. But I can't separate those experiences from who I became. The fun, the people we've helped, the life I've built with Emma and you, all of it grew from that pain. So I can't regret the whole thing, even though parts of it were unbearable. I took her hand. That's the complicated truth about trauma. It shapes you. Sometimes it breaks you. But if you survive it, if you find a way to transform it into something meaningful, it becomes part of your strength. Not because trauma is good, it isn't, but because surviving it teaches you things you can't learn any other way. Patricia squeezed my hand. "I hope I never have to learn those lessons." "Me too, sweetheart," I said. "Me too." On a warm afternoon in June, 22 years after that day in Walmart, I received a call from the governor's office. They wanted to award me the state's highest civilian honor for my work with the fund and my contributions to justice reform. I almost declined. Awards felt strange, like they were celebrating something that shouldn't have had to exist. But Emma convinced me to accept. "Let them honor the work, Mom," she said. "Let them acknowledge that wrongful accusations are real, and that fighting them matters. That's bigger than you feeling uncomfortable." So I accepted. The ceremony was held at the State House, a grand room filled with legislators and advocates and people whose lives had been touched by the fund. The governor gave a speech about my resilience and dedication. He talked about the 3,000 lives the fund had impacted, the systemic changes we'd helped implement, the hope we'd given to people who had none. When he called me to the stage to receive the medal, I walked slowly, aware of every eye in the room. He placed the medal around my neck and shook my hand. "Thank you for your service to justice," he said. I accepted the medal, but when it was my turn to speak, I knew I couldn't accept it just for myself. "This honor belongs to Patricia Brennan," I said, my voice clear despite the emotion. "A woman who died homeless and forgotten, but who had the courage to hand me the evidence that changed everything. It belongs to every person who's been wrongly accused and fought back." It belongs to the attorneys who take these cases when no one else will. It belongs to the families who stand by people everyone else has abandoned. I held up the medal. This isn't mine. It's theirs. I'm just the one standing here to receive it on their behalf. The room erupted in applause. I saw Emma crying, Patricia recording on her phone, Simone beaming from the front row. I saw Curtis and Delia and dozens of other faces I recognized, people whose lives had intersected with mine in the long fight for truth. After the ceremony, people lined up to congratulate me, to thank me, to tell me their stories. I listened to each one, knowing that this was the real award. Not the medal around my neck, but the connections we'd built, the community we'd created, the knowledge that none of us were fighting alone anymore. As I rode home with Emma that evening, I looked out at the city passing by, thinking about how much had changed. Columbus had been the place where everything came together, where I'd helped a stranger and, unknowingly set in motion, a chain of events that would define the rest of my life. You did good, Mom, Emma said quietly. We did good, I corrected. All of us together. She smiled. Yeah, we did. The medal sat on my dresser when we got home, catching the evening light. I thought about Patricia Brennan, about whether she would have been proud or embarrassed by all the attention her final act had generated. I decided she would have been both. Proud of what we'd built, embarrassed by the fuss, determined that we keep working. That sounded exactly like her. My final chapter isn't written yet. I'm still here, still answering emails from people who need help, still attending fun meetings when I have the energy, still teaching Patricia about the law and justice and the difference between the two. I know my time is limited. Everyone's is. But I'm not afraid of the end anymore. I've done what I set out to do. I've turned my suffering into service. I've made sure that what happened to me protects other people. I've rebuilt my relationship with my daughter, and watched my granddaughter grow into someone extraordinary. I've proven that truth wins when people refuse to let it die. That's enough. That's everything. And when I do finally rest, I know the work will continue. Patricia will go to law school. She'll take cases for the fund. She'll help people the way I was helped, the way I helped others. The cycle will continue. Each generation learning from the last. Each person adding their voice to the chorus demanding justice. That's the real victory. Not that I survived, though I did. Not that Leonard and Vivian were punished, though they were. The victory is that the work outlives us. That Patricia Brennan's courage sparked something that can't be extinguished. That $150 spent on a stranger's groceries became a movement. I still shop at that Walmart sometimes. I stand in the checkout line and remember the woman I was that day. Tired and invisible and just trying to survive. I remember Patricia's trembling hands and the gratitude in her eyes. I remember having no idea that kindness could compound into something this vast, this powerful, this enduring. And I smile. Because that's the secret they don't want you to know. That small acts of decency repeated over and over can change the world. That one person who refuses to accept injustice can inspire thousands. That truth once spoken never really dies. It just waits for someone brave enough to hear it. I was that someone. And now there are thousands more. All of us linked by the simple belief that people matter, that truth matters, that justice is worth fighting for even when the fight seems impossible. That's my legacy. Not the awards or the book or the fund's impressive statistics. My legacy is every person who heard my story and decided they wouldn't stay silent. Every person who helped a stranger without expectation. Every person who chose courage over comfort. We're all connected now. A web of witnesses refusing to let lies prosper. And that, more than anything else, is why they couldn't destroy me. Because I was never just one person. I was the beginning of something bigger than myself. Something that Patricia started and I continued and Patricia will carry forward. Something that will outlive us all. Truth doesn't need monuments. It just needs people willing to speak it. And as long as there are people like us, truth will never die. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.